London was the heart of a global empire, and in the summer of 1858, it nearly became a city that couldn't function. Not because of war, not because of fire, because the River Thames, London's lifeline, turned into something the city could no longer ignore. And here's the strange part. This wasn't a sudden disaster. It was a slow, everyday problem that finally became impossible to hide. This is the story of the Great Stink and the hidden engineering decision that quietly changed what a modern city could be. By the mid-19th century, London had grown faster than its infrastructure. Millions of people packed into neighborhoods that were never built for that scale. For centuries, waste had been dealt with locally, pits, small drains, and collections that happened at night. But as the city densified, those old methods didn't just become inconvenient, they became overwhelmed. More and more of what London wanted to forget found its way into gutters, drains, and small streams. Some of those streams were old, lost rivers, channels that once ran openly, then disappeared under streets and buildings. And almost everything, eventually, led to one place, the Thames. Because the Thames wasn't just a pretty river, it was a working river. Boats, docks, markets, an artery running through daily life. So the river collected what London didn't want to see and carried it right back through the middle of town. Then came the heat. In the summer of 1858, low water and high temperatures made the polluted river feel inescapable. When the river slowed down, everything concentrated. And when the air got heavy, the riverside stopped being background scenery and turned into a daily obstacle. People avoided the river when they could. Those with means left the city for a while. Businesses near the water struggled to operate normally. And it wasn't just the smell. It was what the smell represented. Proof that London had outgrown the systems that kept city life stable. The city had reached a point where the river wasn't absorbing the problem anymore. It was reflecting it back. The Houses of Parliament sat right on the river. So that summer, lawmakers didn't read reports about the problem. They experienced it. And their first response was almost symbolic. A very Victorian attempt at solving a city-scale issue with a room-scale fix, covering windows, soaking curtains and blinds with chemicals, trying to keep the outside out. It didn't really work, because you can't fix a river with a curtain. You can't block out a city's consequences with fabric and wishful thinking. But that moment mattered, because it forced the crisis into the one place that could approve a real solution. Once the stink invaded Parliament, the problem finally had the kind of audience that could authorize a massive, expensive plan. So what was the real fix? It wasn't cleaning the Thames the way we might imagine today. Victorian London didn't have a quick, modern cleanup tool. What it could do was change the flow of the city itself. The solution was simple in concept and huge in execution. Intercept the waste before it reaches central London. Build major sewers along both banks of the river. Collect the flow from existing drains, dozens, hundreds of little inputs, and route it into a controlled, engineered path. Then carry it downstream, away from the heart of the city. Not a patch, not a temporary measure. A system that treated the city like a machine, inputs, outputs, and control. And once you think that way, you realize something. The real challenge isn't the river, it's the scale. Because by this point, London wasn't dealing with one bad location. It was dealing with a network effect. More people meant more demand. More demand meant more construction. More construction meant more density. And density meant problems spread faster, through streets, through markets, through the river corridor. Small fixes couldn't keep up with a city that expanded week by week. Even if you improved one neighborhood, the overall flow still pushed everything toward the Thames. And the Thames ran through everything: transport, trade, and the everyday rhythm of the city. So London needed infrastructure that matched London, a plan designed for a metropolis, not a town. And that required someone who could think at the scale of millions. That's where Joseph Bazalgette comes in, chief engineer to the Metropolitan Board of Works. He wasn't selling a single project. He was proposing a new hidden layer beneath the city, a layer that would quietly do its job every hour of every day. After the Great Stink, political urgency finally aligned with funding. What had been discussed in committees suddenly became a priority. And Bazalgette pushed a plan that was bold for its time, a city-wide network that didn't just respond to the present moment, but tried to survive London's future growth. That mindset, planning for what comes next, is what separates a temporary fix from lasting infrastructure. Parliament approved massive spending, famously around £2.5 million at the start, an enormous sum for the era. But the key wasn't just money, it was the decision to think long-term. Bazalgette didn't just draw lines on a map, he calculated flows, he considered expansion. He pushed for large main tunnels, because a sewer that's barely big enough on day one becomes a bottleneck on day two. In infrastructure, almost enough is another way of saying future failure. So the plan wasn't to build a thin solution, it was to build a backbone, main routes big enough that smaller drains could feed into them for decades. That's not glamorous engineering. It's stubborn engineering. And cities run on stubborn engineering. The scale was staggering. Roughly 1,100 miles of street drains fed into about 82 miles of new, brick-lined main sewers. Hundreds of millions of bricks went into tunnels you'd never see from street level. And it wasn't one clean construction site. It was dozens of projects happening across a living city. Materials arriving, scaffolding going up, streets disrupted, work staged along the river corridor. Much of it was built with methods that look almost unreal today, measured, shaped, and assembled with remarkable precision, often by hand. The result was something London had never had before, a controlled path for a problem that had always spread everywhere. But there was another twist. To house and protect parts of that system, the city itself had to change shape. The sewer project didn't stay underground. New embankments along the Thames reshaped the river's edges. They helped house key parts of the system, stabilize the banks, and reclaimed land above it. So you had this strange Victorian magic trick, a massive invisible network built under the city, and above it, new roads, new walkways, a cleaner, more controlled riverside. Infrastructure was no longer just something you built around. It became something you built the city on top of. And once you do that, the system still needs one more ingredient: power. Because London isn't flat. Gravity can do a lot, but not everything. London's network needed muscle, pumping stations powered by steam engines. They lifted the flow so gravity could carry it onward. In other words, the system wasn't just tunnels, it was a machine. One famous example was Crossness, built in the 1860s at the end of the Southern Outfall. From the outside, parts of this infrastructure looked like civic architecture, solid brick, proud engineering. Inside it was steel and steam and motion. And here's the irony. Some of the most impressive Victorian machinery existed to handle the job no one wanted to mention at the dinner table. But once it worked, people stopped talking about it. That's how infrastructure wins, by becoming invisible. And at the time, invisibility also matched how many people thought the danger worked. Through air, through atmosphere, through what you couldn't quite see. Victorians widely believed disease traveled through bad air, the miasma theory, so the smell felt like a public danger in itself. Not just unpleasant, threatening. That belief shaped the language of the crisis. It shaped what people demanded, it shaped what politicians could justify, and it explains why the Great Stink mattered politically. Even if you didn't understand the science, you understood the fear. When the river smelled unbearable, it became a symbol that the city was out of control. A modern capital couldn't feel like that and keep its credibility. But even as many people blamed the air, investigators were already questioning the story, and the evidence was pointing somewhere else, not toward smell, but toward water. Medical investigators like John Snow had argued earlier that cholera spread through contaminated water, an idea that would become central to modern public health. And here's why that matters in this story. The sewer system wasn't designed as a medical project. It was designed as a sanitation and engineering project. But engineering can change health outcomes even when the language of the time is wrong. When cholera returned in 1866, the worst impact was linked to areas not yet properly connected to the new system, a stark hint that pipes mattered more than perfume. That doesn't mean the Great Stink solved everything, it doesn't. But it helped force London toward a truth cities learned the hard way. You can't negotiate with scale. You can only build for it. And once the system was largely in place, it changed what London could become, because it separated the city's growth from the river's ability to absorb the consequences. The Great Stink didn't fix sanitation overnight, but it forced London to stop pretending the Thames could absorb the city. By 1875, the main system was effectively complete, and large parts of it still shape London's underground today. That's the quiet power of infrastructure. Once it works, you stop noticing it. You notice the street above. You notice the light in the window. You notice the city moving. And you forget that beneath your feet there's a hidden layer. A layer built because one summer made ignoring reality impossible. Next time, gaslight. How a new kind of street lighting didn't just change the night, it changed the economy of the city. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more. We're rebuilding the hidden history of cities, one forgotten system at a time.